Well, for a look now at how the French press have been reacting to last night's debate, I'm joined by our paper reviewer, Elena Casas. Elena, what's been the reaction?
Well, it's just how aggressive and verbally violent even they were to each other that's really made the front pages for the French, who generally expect much more sedate and polite debating in this kind of circumstance from their politicians. So the knives were really out, as Les Echos puts it. They flag up a pile of quotes at Sarkozy calling Hollande incompetent and saying, you just talk about mobilising people, but I do it. Hollande saying, I don't distinguish real work from false, after a quote from Sarkozy's last week. He said, you put your friends into high places, which Sarkozy responded to by calling it slander. They really did lay into one another, shouting at each other, talking on top of one another. But they did also both land some pretty strong, good, well-scripted, if you like, punches, the newspapers say. It was quite good in terms of rhetoric and debating from both of them. It was good TV. It was worth watching for 3 hours. They do accuse them both of being a bit too technical and a bit too long and going into great economic detail at length that ordinary viewers could hardly expect to follow, they say. But they're also having a look at body language in that paper, talking about Sarkozy, especially how he kept leaning forwards towards Hollande and then back and shaking and rubbing his hands together, all things that they say made him look more edgy, more nervous, more sort of on the back foot compared to a much calmer, much more relaxed François Hollande, who remained pretty still throughout the whole debate. That's something a lot of users on Twitter managed to mock the president about last night. One user saying, Sarkozy says that all of France is an earthquake zone. When he was talking about nuclear, he says this, and if he carries on shaking like that, it soon will be.
Very good. Well, it was a draw that seemed to be the conclusion from Les Echos, but do the other papers agree with that?
Well, yes, Le Figaro, the right-wing paper, can normally always be relied on to defend Sarkozy, but they reckon that in terms of debating skill, it was pretty much even last night. They say, though, that François Hollande's rhetoric harks back to a kind of ancient socialist France that's no longer relevant to anyone. Over at Le Parisien, they've sifted the debate. That's their front-page headline. We've put it through a sieve and come up with the best bits. Now, they also criticise the candidates for being a little bit too technical, too long, too many piles of avalanches of numbers. They say you couldn't really understand. It was too economic, and they attack them on the war of words. They used words like slander, you're a demagogue, your spending plans are madness, you're incompetent, that kind of thing. They say that's not the sort of language you'd expect to hear from presidential candidates. But they reckon that Hollande succeeded on a couple of key points. Firstly, he won over those people who might previously have thought he just didn't have the spirit to do this. He didn't quite have the ability to go for the jugular like Sarkozy can. He proved last night he can be as tough as anyone, they say. And he also managed to force Sarkozy to defend his record, something the president's avoided doing throughout the whole election campaign, preferring to present himself as a new candidate. Hollande forced him to go over some old ground, which was not what Sarkozy wanted. They also criticised the president there for some really low blows. Of course, he brought up Dominique Strauss-Kahn at one point, which brought one Twitter user to say that it was like kicking a football from 57 metres with your bad foot in the 93rd minute, which I don't know much about football. I think that means he's pretty desperate. And of course, his hard line on immigration also didn't go down too well either on Twitter or with the papers. Le Parisien said he went too far in, if you like, implying that allowing immigrants to vote in municipal elections, a Hollande policy, would mean they'd then impose essentially Islamic fundamentalism. He tried to suggest that meant there would be halal meat in all school canteens, things like that. Something Le Parisien say went too far. It caused the Belgian journalist Stefan de Vries to tweet, well, as you can see, since Dutch people can vote in French municipal elections, Gouda cheese is now compulsory in all canteens.
Very good. Well, some criticism then of President Sarkozy, and some people picking a winner even.
Well, Libération, of course, the left-leaning paper, back Hollande all the way, and they certainly think their man won over the day last night, saying he conquered the debate in that front page. They do point out it's unlikely many people's views were actually changed. As few as 11% of viewers polling yesterday said that they hadn't made their mind up yet already, but they said anyone who was yet to be won over should have been conquered by Hollande last night.
Okay, and just very briefly, the website Atlantico does seem to think that some people's minds might have been changed.
Yes, they did a very early opinion poll. They spoke to 500 people during and immediately after the debate last night, so not a huge sample, but they say a number of those people said that their opinion of Hollande had changed, and all for the better. What they thought about Nicolas Sarkozy, though, remained the same at the beginning and at the end, and most of those people thought that Hollande had won the debate, that he's conquered the day. Interestingly, they also said they didn't think the debate was too technical. They thought that the candidates did really talk about the subjects that viewers want to hear, so maybe actually they want more economic data than some journalists assume.
Okay, well, thanks very much indeed, Elena, for that analysis of the coverage of last night's debate.